Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Public Works Finance and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, November 18, 2019. First item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. A motion by Bueller, second by Lallam. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 2 is public input. This is a time set aside for anybody to talk about whatever they want. Is anybody here for that? Seeing no one, we'll move on. Item 3 is approval of the agenda. Motion by Vilhauer, second by Holeen. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item 4 is presentation and discussion with City Council regarding the preliminary stormwater utility fee and structure assessment findings by SEH. And I see our consultants here with Heath. So Heath, I'll let you do the introductions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of Council, we're happy to be here tonight in front of you presenting some findings from our consultants' work on the potential implementation of a stormwater utility for the city of Watertown. If you remember, a few months back, we entered into an agreement with SEH engineering consultants to help us kind of set the groundwork and do some exploratory work for us on what a stormwater utility implemented in the city of Watertown might look like, and some of the benefits that we would gain from that in regards to projecting revenues, and what some standardized rates are that are applied throughout the region as far as a stormwater utility rate to be assessed to the community. To step back a little bit further, as you all know, we've been trying to come up with ways and explore options that are available to us in order to help fund the general fund in particular in meeting the needs of our ongoing annual operations and maintenance expenses. Now that includes our staff, our equipment, all the things that are under the general fund related to street and stormwater maintenance currently. The stormwater utility establishment is a viable option that several communities use throughout the region and within South Dakota as well. And we've got some specific data on that and what those, who those other communities are, what their rates look like, and we've even got some proposals for what we would see a viable option of implementing as a rate for the city of Watertown. So with all that being said, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Walgrave. He's a licensed engineer with SEH that did a majority of the work for us on this study. And he's got a presentation here. He'll go through some of the details. And feel free to stop anytime during this presentation of Jeremy's, and we can help answer any questions anybody might have.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Whoops. So this is a pretty high level overview of what a stormwater utility is exactly, and why people usually pursue a stormwater utility. So again, if you have questions, if you want to get into specifics about something, feel free to jump in. So again, just a rough definition of stormwater. Basically, the rain falls, it collects into runoff. A lot of times the stormwater will soak into the ground, and as you add development and hard surfaces and remove vegetation, it doesn't have that chance to soak into the ground anymore, and it runs off. And essentially, the more you develop your city, the more runoff you're going to have. So stormwater management basically is the practice of dealing with all this runoff to mitigate flooding issues, flood risks, pollutant loading, things like that. And just a few of the activities that you're already doing that manage stormwater are street sweeping, ditch, culvert, and storm sewer cleaning, and then also the inspection and reporting side of things. So again, why is it needed? Again, as your city grows and you develop and add hard surfaces, you're going to have a lot more runoff to deal with. And so managing that stormwater helps you deal with flooding issues and then also pollutant issues. Again, here's kind of a bigger list of all the different stormwater management things that you're already doing in the city. Again, anything from street sweeping to ditch and culvert maintenance, and then maintenance of your storm sewer pipes, storm sewer ponds, outfalls, any pollution control devices that you have, catch basins, manholes, and the like. So currently, the way that Watertown funds stormwater management is through a combination of assessments. Some of it comes from the general fund, some of it comes out of the capital improvement plan. And then, again, one of the things that's notable here, relevant to the conversation, is just that the emergency stormwater management activities that you have end up coming out of these different funds and end up displacing other projects. So again, stormwater utility is basically a dedicated and user-based utility fee to fund stormwater management activities. And it's also a tool used by many cities to establish a fair and equitable system for funding stormwater management. Some of the guiding principles of a stormwater utility, again, it's a user fee. So generally speaking, the more you use, the more you pay. And so when you start looking at institutional, industrial, and commercial type properties, they tend to have a lot higher impervious surface, and they tend to pay more when it comes to a stormwater utility fee. And again, this is similar to sanitary water and other utilities, where the more you use, the more you pay. So again, some of the goals of the stormwater utility are to fund stormwater management in a more equitable manner, and then also fund stormwater management without displacing other projects, especially in those emergency situations. So why stormwater utility? It's a dependable fund, doesn't compete with the capital improvement plan or the general fund. It's consistent. It's a separate and dedicated fund. And then another benefit of a stormwater utility is having that in place can actually help you get other grant funding because they see that you have a plan in place. And again, it's equitable, so all of the developed properties pay. So this is just kind of a typical breakdown of what you see for some stormwater management costs in a typical city. Usually about 70% of it is going to be paying for equipment, personnel, actual physical maintenance of the system and infrastructure, and then a little smaller piece of the pie is some of the planning and engineering that goes into the different pieces. And then I should say the NPDES MS4 is important to note, because that's something that you're mandated to do by the state, and it includes education and maintenance and a number of other administrative type activities that get funded under stormwater management. Yeah.
Jeremy or maybe Kristen, make sure I want to understand this. Do the dollars actually go directly into the general fund designated for this purpose, or do they go into a separate fund to be used for this purpose? Yeah. Understand my question?
Mm-hmm. You have an answer to that, Jeremy?
Yeah, typically it's going to be a separate fund, so it would be outside of the general fund. And again, that's why it's a dedicated, specific to stormwater management. Yep.
And maybe to further clarify that point of Councilman Vilhauer's, that fund then can be used for both general fund type expenses like personnel, equipment, or capital improvements like actual physical improvements of the infrastructure out in place, or new infrastructure.
But it's all designated for this particular sort of use, though?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Correct.
So again, how will the funds be used? Basically, maintenance of your existing system, best practices like street sweeping and catch basin maintenance. It would be used for equipment for operations and maintenance, and then also the public education and training, and then also kind of those emergency situations related to stormwater and flooding. Again, equipment, personnel, you know, dealing with kind of the administrative side of stormwater management, professional services such as planning, studies, and engineering. And then again, as you update ordinances, it can be used to fund those type activities. So this is kind of an example, and feel free to ask questions. It's kind of a confusing slide if you don't know some of the background, but basically kind of the way we're looking at this is that residential homeowners would just have a flat fee. This would be a monthly fee of $3 a month. This isn't set, this is just an example. But basically the idea is that residential properties are just going to have the same fee. It's not going to matter how large the lot size is. But that's used with an equation to basically set up what you will charge these different type properties. So again, if we went with a $3 fee for residential homeowners, basically the way it would shake out with commercial, institutional, industrial, and high-density residential, it comes out to a per acre cost, and so that's what you see here. And again, there's some factors that you don't see that are kind of behind the scenes, but just looking at the dollar amounts, what you can kind of tell is that the commercial properties tend to have the highest amount of impervious or hard surface, which is why they tend to pay more than other land use types. And so again, this is a fee per acre for these top four, and then the residential unit is just a flat fee. And again, just to kind of recap that, it's based on, the charges are based on runoff and not property value. So again, those fees are basically figured out based on the land use, hard surface, and then total property area.
Thank you. I apologize for interrupting, but I had a question for that while you were talking about it. So residential lots, regardless of size, will be charged the same amount?
That's right.
Okay. Does that, earlier in your presentation, you said that one of the things that was attractive about a stormwater fee was that it was basically user paid. The more you use, the more you pay. Doesn't that seem to contradict that, however?
That's a good point, and essentially when you go back and you look at the math with, if you've got a 10-acre property with a house on it and a driveway, and you look at the runoff from a 1-acre property, it's going to be a little bit more for a larger property, but essentially the differences in the amount of runoff are not great in comparison to, say, a Walmart where they've got 80% of their property paved. And so the other thing with the residential properties is the charges are relatively small when you start comparing to the other properties, and it's actually a way of simplifying the administrative part of how you implement the ordinance on the back end, meaning then basically it's set up so that residential properties get a straight fee, and they don't have any kind of opportunity to come back and argue that they've got less impervious than their neighbor. It's certainly debatable. There are cities that set up the ordinance differently, where the residential properties are charged by square footage. But again, what I've seen on the back end with that is it turns into kind of an administrative burden, because the city officials are constantly having to go and remeasure people's property. And in the grand scheme of things, when you see how much difference it makes, it's a very small amount.
And just to piggyback on that, Councilman Holling, and I forgot to acknowledge these other folks that worked on this, what I'd call a subcommittee for this project here internally, as far as internal city staff, the city attorney, the finance officer, the mayor, myself, the street superintendent, and the assistant city engineer all worked with Jeremy on some of these discussions. And this was one that we talked thoroughly about as far as the level of detail to get into when establishing a stormwater utility. One of the messages we gave our consultant was to try to keep it as simple as possible from an administrative standpoint, but also make sure that it made sense too on an equitability standpoint as far as what you just pointed out. So based on the findings of the consultant and what Jeremy just described, we felt that the administrative burden that it could grow into if we were to have a per impervious square foot on a residential lot basis. On an annual basis, we could be having a lot of different calculations and recalculations as houses expand, somebody puts an addition on, somebody builds a garage and adds a driveway, somebody demos a house and builds a completely new footprint of a house. All these scenarios that can come up throughout the year that would cause us then to go back and have to go out there and physically remeasure and calculate their actual percent imperviousness. And we felt, at least in general discussion, that it maybe wouldn't be worth the effort for what would otherwise be a pretty minor adjustment to those runoff rates for those each individual residences. You know, instead of paying $3, maybe it's $2.79, or you know, another figure like that. It's such a minute difference at that scale that we didn't see the benefit as a community to administer it that way.
Thank you very much, actually. That's one of the good, I'm very glad that you guys had talked about that. So your assessment, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Your idea that possibly the rate would go from $3 down to like $2.79, and maybe like a really large residential lot might go from $3 to like $3.30,
Right.
something like that. Are those like realistic expectations? We're not just throwing ideas up in the air, because I can imagine getting questions from people out in the community, because there is quite a bit of a difference between some of these very large houses in town and some of the smaller houses. So I think it would behoove all of us to know this ahead of time. So if that is a realistic numbers, are those realistic numbers that you guys are kind of throwing out as examples? I mean, I know I'm not going to hold it to you as gospel, but just I wanted to know. Thanks.
Yeah, and they would be realistic numbers for specific instances. Now, those numbers could obviously swing either direction, a little higher or lower, but you could definitely find examples to where it's very minute difference. And I think the overarching aspect of it too is how proficient do we want to be with the current staff loads that we have right now in administering this if we were to adopt this. And I think that that's a big component in my mind. Administratively, if we went to the more detailed level that some communities do, and frankly some communities have done that and reverted back to the simple level just because of the fact they realized what an administrative burden it became after they implemented it. So we wanted to be sensitive to that as well.
Glenn?
I guess questioned administratively, I'm not sure if it's a question for you or for Matt. This would actually be an ordinance that we would be adopting, correct? Now, would the rates then be spelled out in the ordinance? And if so, I mean, I'm seeing some nodding of yes. I mean, but I mean, these rates aren't necessarily permanent either. They're going to fluctuate and they're going to change from year to year, right? So that means we'd have an ordinance revision or amendment periodically, or?
Well, I think it's currently in the ordinance as it's proposed. With some of our fees in the community, we don't set the fee in the ordinance. We set it by that annual resolution. So if the council were to choose that direction, we could certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
And that those other fees are reviewed every year.
Right,
So
okay.
you probably
I
wouldn't
just don't want to
need
see us having to potentially amend an ordinance every year, every other year, and, okay.
That was my next slide.
Yes, Councilman Bueller.
I was waiting for the questions. These guys, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, to the administrative part of this, I'm curious as to what additional administration efforts would be involved with having to do this, the cost of that. And also, Mayor, and I know we've talked about this, but what would we expect our total revenue, annual revenue to be from this?
That's a question for Jeremy.
Okay, there you go, Jeremy. Those are my two right now. But part of that might go to Kristen too, as far as administration goes. The how much involvement we would have and what kind of effort would be necessary to take care of this thing.
There will be some effort on the front end to get it built into the billing system. And then maybe, Kristen, I don't know if there are revisions, how complicated that is, but do you want to speak to that, or?
I don't know if we've really got into the detail of yet the billing process, how we would handle that. Of course, we do have municipal utilities currently does the solid waste and the sewer billing. So I think there's still some conversations to be had with the utilities as regards to that. I would say a majority of the data is already in the system because we already have property owners. And so I think the front end, I think anytime there's a change, if it's a fee change or a rate change, that's not where it's going to be significant. I would say it's that upfront establishing it. Yeah.
Okay. And then just to round that out, the other administrative fees are going to be if there are appeals. And again, the way it's set up right now, the residential properties wouldn't have an opportunity to appeal. It's just a straight fee for everybody. Commercial, institutional, the other type land uses, if they felt that the area or the acreage of their property was incorrect, they could appeal that to have a remeasure of their property. What I've seen from other communities similar in size to Watertown is that you may get 2 or 3 of those a year. And back to Heath's point about other communities that I have seen that have set it up on an area basis for residential, there is a huge administrative burden because like Heath was saying, what you'll have is people showing up saying, I tore out a sidewalk panel, you need to remeasure. And it will, in terms of the dollar amount they're getting charged, it's minuscule, but it costs somebody time to go out and look at it. Your second question was about revenue generation. And what we've estimated right now, if you went with that $3 fee, you could generate around $800,000 a year. Roughly speaking, if you went to $2, it's probably around $500,000.
Yeah, if I could piggyback onto that, I do have some information too, because I think the next logical question is, what has our annual need been over the last few years? I did pull some quick numbers from our current year's budget. In the CIP, for example, we have roughly $600,000 worth of stormwater-related improvements in the 2019 CIP. Now, I'll also note that at least $200,000 of those improvements we had to pull and use that money on street improvements because our street bids were coming in high. So the Roby Creek drainage improvements, for example, we had to cancel that project completely from 2019. So this year's CIP, roughly $600,000. We also have the water resources budget that is really the education, the community education component of our stormwater program for the city of Watertown. Now that's not a huge budget, but it is definitely one that could benefit from using these funds. That's about a $40,000 to $60,000 a year responsibility that the city has. Some of those costs go towards our USGS river gauging, for example. A lot of these costs goes towards our Wendell the Raindrop public education outreach that we do on stormwater impacts and things of that nature. Another big component that I quick extracted out of the 2019 budget was from the wastewater collections and street equipment budgets. For example, we purchased a new jetter, and I think that depends on the type of equipment that we're getting, whether it's a trailer mounted jetter or a full Vector truck. That equipment is shared between the wastewater division and the stormwater function of the city. And those pieces of equipment can range anywhere from a couple $100,000 up to over $500,000, depending on what they are. Another piece of equipment that would be viable to be covered under this type of utility fee would be a street sweeper. We currently have in our budget $285,000 for a new street sweeper. And the last item is staff. Now, I'm not going to by any means sit in front of you tonight and tell you I calculated exactly what our staff costs are for stormwater functions throughout the city, because that would have been difficult for me to accomplish. But I can tell you, wastewater collections, who are generally the guys that help jet the stormwater system, have an annual staffing fee of roughly $390,000. Engineering has a rough annual salary budget of about $560,000. And the streets department has an annual employee salary of about $1 million. You add those three groups up that all partner on annual stormwater maintenance, and you're sitting on roughly $2 million total. Now, if we take a conservative number, and by conservative I mean low, a low estimate of the amount of time we spend on stormwater related issues, you figure maybe an eighth of that $2 million is spent on stormwater. And again, I'll say it's probably on the low end. And there you're sitting at about $250,000 worth of annual salaries that this could help fund based on those efforts from those three divisions of Public Works. And then the last item I'll point out in relation to all this is Colin provided me with a list of, we got about 50 locations throughout town, 50 drainage issues that we compile as we receive them in the engineering office. And we've got a good solid prioritization of those drainage issues, but a lack of funds to perform them on an annual basis. So we're sitting with a list of about 50 problem areas that date clear back to 2007, all the way up through current to this year. And so those are the kind of projects, too, that this fund would help accomplish and complete as well. So I figured I'd wrap all that in with that budgetary discussion on the amount of revenue at $3 for residential lots, about $800,000. If we drop that to $2, you're about $500,000. And either one would go a long way in help accomplishing some of these costs that I've outlined.
No, that's,
That's the total. It's the total based on that $3 per residential, because the rest of those are calculated subsequently off whatever we set that residential rate at.
Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, I think that you've already addressed this question around it, but I'm going to ask it just straightforward because it's a question that we will get asked out in public. How is this going to help our roads?
Well, from a road standpoint, you know, the most applicable infrastructure that is directly related to our roads that relates to stormwater would be our curb and gutter and our drop inlets to the storm sewer system. So maintenance on those components can be covered by this utility fee. And, you know, I haven't laid out a trajectory of the projects that would use this money to get spent on, you know, but there's components to this, the ability of having these funds that would affect our roads indirectly. You know, the less burden that these stormwater improvements have on our CIP, the potential more room in the CIP for roadway improvements.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it would free up. Sorry, but it would free up the street department and give them more utensils to address the problems that people are concerned with, is the way that I'm kind of seeing it. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. Staffing and resources, whether it be personnel or equipment, are all applicable benefits for this utility to go towards. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not proposing that we hire new staff with this money. I'm not proposing that we buy 6 new pieces of equipment with this money right now today, but rather wanted to lay out some of the real costs that we had in our current year's budget that could have benefited by having a utility like this in place.
Councilman Hoyer?
Just for clarity, so if we were to implement this fund, this does, and I know this is kind of what you asked before, but I just really want it super clear. So if we applied this, it would open up potential funds that we could actually apply more towards the road, because if it's coming out of capital gains and stuff, then those funds now become available for other projects, so we could maybe address some of these things, correct?
That is true. Depending on how these funds are shifted between operations and capital, you're absolutely right. Let's take this $800,000 number, for example. Maybe you want to split that 50-50, half of it towards operations, half of it towards capital. But that'd be up to the council. We could designate that shift, that percentage, any which way you'd like. If you wanted more of that towards capital and help realize some reduced stress on the capital side to put more money into the street improvements, that's definitely a viable option. If you want to realize more benefit on the general fund side, however, you'd want to keep that checks and balances in mind, knowing currently where a general fund sits today.
Councilman Roby?
My comments are along those lines, where I think we could lever this based upon where it's needed most. But the analogy I'll use is statewide, nationwide. We've got all these bridges, this aging infrastructure that's coming due, and we don't have any fund in place to address them. And we're trying to shore that up on a state and a nationwide basis. But we have aging infrastructure here too, and I like it, the fact that the fee is directly tied to where it's going to go, because we do have an aging infrastructure.
Right, thank you. Councilman Albertson?
Is this a utility billing, so everybody in the city that has utility, like if you're an apartment house, would that be, what would the charge be on a typical apartment house?
Yes.
I understand the residential, but if you're in this big apartment house, then.
Right, good question. So typically, if that would be considered a or a high-density residential, and that one actually does get a fee based on the impervious. And typically what happens is one person or a couple people own that building, so they're the ones that actually they get charged the fee. It's up to them to distribute it amongst the apartments.
It doesn't come on a utility bill, it does for the owner of the
Right.
property, but not for
That's
the
right.
people that live there.
Yeah.
Correct.
And if I could expand on Councilman Albertson's question too, the utility billing component of this is something, as Kristen indicated, that we need to continue to talk through. I've had some very preliminary discussions with our sister agency over at Watertown Municipal Utilities and some of the staff over there. But I do need to have, we need to have further conversations with the manager over at Utilities and bring them fully on board with what our vision is to roll this out as part of the utility bill. Now, what that does do is it creates some logistics for them to have to work through as well. And we want to make sure that we're doing that arm in arm with them and addressing any concerns they might have in order to implement it that way. But we as a committee, again, felt that rolling this out as a stormwater utility to help specifically cover those utility-based functions of the city, and then incorporating it on the utility bill was the optimal way to go. And but it is going to take some further discussions with Watertown Municipal Utilities to accomplish that.
Councilman Villar?
In general, I like what I'm hearing, but it looks like we have a lot of details to work out. Whose court is the ball in this? What's the next step if we do move forward with this?
I do have another follow-up meeting scheduled with utilities as far as implementing on the utility bill, and that is on December 2nd, I believe. And that's one of the next critical steps, is if the council were amicable to want to proceed that way. The reason I should probably clarify here, we as a city have another option to assess this fee on the annual tax base for the properties that this fee would be going towards. There are a handful of communities in South Dakota that do it that way. In fact, 5 out of the 7 do it per a tax assessment on the annual tax bill. There are 2 other communities of the 7 that do it as a municipal utility on a monthly bill. Because we are establishing a new utility, I personally just, again, like the idea and the mindset of having a monthly utility bill that is associated with that utility that we're establishing, just like we do for sanitary sewer. just like we do for water, just like we do for our gas and our city electric and our solid waste. To me, it helps provide the clearest vision to the community of what this is, why we're doing it, where their money is going, and it might make most sense to them by doing it that way. Now, I'll further expand too, the communities in the region, when you look at it regionally, it's overwhelmingly assessed monthly on the utility bills. If you look into Minnesota, North Dakota, Iowa, west of Montana, it's overwhelmingly assessed on the monthly utility bill. It just so happens in South Dakota, 5 out of the 7 do the tax route, and then 2 out of the 7 do the utilities.
I mean, I know our colleagues, the utilities, would prefer that we put on the tax rolls, but I think too, it just makes an awful lot more sense to collect as part of our monthly utility bill versus dealing with it via the tax assessment roll. And but anyway, so is your work then, or SEH's work, is that about done then? So the ball's solely in the city's court then on this?
We're here to assist with educational materials, finalizing the ordinance. If we want to play with the monthly fee, whether it be $2, $3, $4, to see what that generates, we're here to do that and help you work through the process as well.
Yes, Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Where these funds are earmarked, will they be earmarked, I should say, for specific uses like we were talking about, like street sweepers and jetters and all the different things that you listed? Would they be earmarked for only those types of expenditures?
The ordinance would specify some of that. What I would say, they aren't going to earmark a specific project or a specific piece of equipment. It would be more general, though, saying.
Yeah, what I guess I'm getting at is you've got a list of things that money could be used for.
Right.
Correct? And that's what it has to be used for. It can't be used for any other stuff.
Right. So I think whatever the ordinance establishes that we all agree it can be used for, a fund will be established. So then during each budget process, the items such as if there's a certain amount of personnel we know would go toward it, equipment or projects, we would budget those in that fund, and in turn that revenue would specifically go into that fund. So it's kind of almost like its own enterprise fund, a little bit the same way that the sewer fund and the solid waste are. So the ordinance would establish, as I said, what expenditures could go in there. We would budget them separate of anything, and then the revenues would basically offset that.
One thing about a stormwater utility that's a little bit different from our other enterprise funds, the stormwater infrastructure is so enmeshed with the street. So the curb and gutter is actually a stormwater management feature of our roads. It's a roadway feature as well. And so would you pay for the curb and gutter out of the stormwater utility or out of the capital improvement fund on a street project? And I would say you could do either. You could pay for it 100% out of the capital improvement funds, or you could pay for it 100% out of stormwater utility funds, or you could do a little bit of each. And it would be up to us to decide what the council, the city, we self-determine how we want to use those funds. And some of the equipment that we purchase with general funds, like sweepers and that sort of thing, a street sweeper is not just a drainage tool. It cleans the road and, it protects the water quality, but it also has an aesthetic purpose. And so what percent of that should we charge to a stormwater utility? We have some leeway there. Some things are obvious, like catch basin is a stormwater feature, but it's on a street project. So, there's a lot of gray area, much more so with a stormwater utility than there would for a sewer utility, for instance, because nothing on the road should go into the sanitary sewer. Everything on the road goes into the storm sewer, and reasons that you got to do other things to protect that. So we have a lot of leeway in how we can write that ordinance. Other questions? Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, earlier on in your presentation, you mentioned that having this would help obtain some grant funding. I was sorry to shift topics, but I wanted to know, what are these grants? How much money are we talking about? Where does the money come from? And what would our realistic expectations be of actually getting them?
I don't have any specifics for you on grant programs or funding amounts. It was more of a general statement, though, that typically when you have a plan or you have a fund like this, it shows that I guess a higher level thinking on the part of the city that we have stormwater that we have to deal with. We've dedicated a fund, and a lot of the grants that I have read through will ask specific questions like that. And then within the grant ranking criteria, typically cities with a plan or a fund will receive a higher ranking.
Any other questions? All right, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
In closing, I guess as far as the timeline goes, kind of circling back to Councilman Vilhauer's question on what's next, maybe some indirect guidance from the council tonight would be appropriate on where you feel we should take this. If where we're at right now is Jeremy has a draft ordinance prepared, and we could bring that to council the first meeting in December for first reading if you so desired. We have looked through it as a committee, again, internally from staff. We are comfortable with the recommendations that are being made through that ordinance. I would want to make sure that you as a council are comfortable with what we presented tonight before doing that, and would take some guidance or suggestions from you in that manner.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I wouldn't mind seeing that. At the same time, if you can continue to work out the details or the administrative part of it with the utilities internally, et cetera, I'd like to keep us moving forward on this. It's been in the public eye off and on the last several months, and now it is again tonight. That let's keep moving forward and see where it goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Councilman Roby?
I also would like to see a copy of that, but if this gets favorable review from the council and it doesn't move forward, is that something we have to do on a fiscal year calendar, or let's say budget year, or can that be implemented at any time?
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be on the utility bill, and whenever it's implemented, it can start being billed. If it's going to be sent to the county on the property tax, that's a little bit different discussion as far as the timing goes for that. But
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do it in 2020 on a tax bill. We've missed that window. Anyone else?
Just one quick question.
Councilman Bueller?
If we do this, we would have a public hearing, would we not, for first reading? Would that go? Okay.
At a second reading.
technically, no.
Second reading.
We don't have to, but I think we would.
I think,
I mean, the mayor, I think, usually lets people speak if they want to, but I don't think technically ordinances don't require public hearings.
Some ordinances
would we put it
do.
on the agenda?
Some do.
Okay, good. I think that's a good idea.
Councilman Holeen?
Thank you, Mayor. I would be in favor of moving ahead and seeing the ordinance. My question at this point would be not so much on the ordinance, but perhaps on the resolution setting the fee, because if we are going to talk about raising revenue, whether you call it a tax or utility, this is what we're doing. And now when Heath said that he can kind of point to $600,000 in the general fund that was set aside that would be covered in this one, but this would raise, let's say, if it was like a $3 fee for residential, that would raise $800,000. So personally, I would like to see the justification for taxing more than what we currently need, or is there a way to tax just to the point where we cover the amount that we're needed right now?
His amounts added up to well over $1 million. The 600 was just capital projects, and then staff was another 250. I mean,
I understand, but he himself said that that was more of a nebulous cost, and with not hard numbers. I understand where you're coming from, but
Right.
just wanted to know for sure why we set that number where it is, and I mean, if you were going to argue that it amounts to well over $1 million, then why aren't we taxing well over $1 million?
Well, for one thing, we don't want to shock people with money they haven't budgeted. And, I mean, people have tight budgets, and $3 a month doesn't seem like much, but if you're living month to month, another $3 can be significant. And so, I mean, I think we want to be mindful of that, even though it's small, it can be significant. And we don't want to overwhelm people. Kristen?
I will add to, with this being established as a separate fund, we do know that we see fluctuations in our budgets, whether we have a really heavy year for expenditures or a lower year. So any revenue that would come in, if it did exceed, per se, 1 year's plan, those dollars would still be in that fund. So they would just kind of accumulate. So then if the next year, because of weather, projects, timing, staffing, however it may be, your next year was above what you anticipated, you know, you'd still want to balance yourself within whatever was not spent in a previous year. So with those dollars being in their own fund, you will see some fluctuation.
Yeah. Councilman Vilhauer?
But I think what we want to make sure we don't do, though, is, I understand exactly what you're saying, Chris, and I think that's where you're coming from too, Reed, is that we need to draft that ordinance in such a way that we understand what it can be used for. I mean, staff's going to change, council's going to change. I don't want us to be accused of building up this fund and all of a sudden using it for something that it's not designated or supposed to be used for, because now we've created ourselves something that is not what we're intending today. I think we all understand today what we're trying to accomplish, but as time goes by, we need to make sure that we are still using it for legitimate purposes.
Yep. Absolutely.
Can I add one thing? Oh.
Councilman Lallam has a...
Just one quick question. How does that work with, a parcel with no improvements on it, bare land, or say a subdivision where, they have started planting them out, but they don't have any structures on it?
Yeah, good question. Vacant land is essentially exempt because you don't have there's no hard surface, so you don't, in theory it's soaking into the ground, so they're exempt.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, is that it then?
That is it on this
Okay.
end. We thank you guys for the questions and the discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
All right, item number 5 is the Snowgate presentation. And Heath, did you want to introduce that or just let Rob take it?
Yeah, I'll just do a quick introduction here. Rob will be, Street Superintendent Rob Bainan can come and join me up here. He'll be providing some Snowgate information to the council this evening. This is obviously we're getting right into the midst of snow season here. So it's a fairly timely discussion to be having, and we're fortunate to have had the time and the lack of snow recently to put this together. Due to the busy season we've had this year, we apologize for the tardiness of this. We could have brought it to you a couple months ago, but Rob has done a great job at cranking this information out and assembling this data and sharing it with you here tonight ahead of the brunt of the snow season that's yet to come. So with that, I'll pass it over to Rob, and we'll talk through this together.
Thank you, Heath and Mayor. Basically I wanted to talk about snow gates a little bit, just to inform you and the public about the gates. There's a lot of questions that come up each year about the gates, and hopefully this will help a little bit. All right, snow gate informational is purpose of this presentation is to inform you of how snow gates function, as well as the pros and the cons of their use. The following will provide information of our intended use of snow gates for 19 and 20 snow season. Basically, a lot of people don't know what a snow gate even is. And basically our motor graders, we have 3 of them, and they're suited, they're 6-wheel drive blades, and they're suited with the snow gate on the outside there. You can see that the next picture actually shows it a little better. The snow gate that goes up and down and contains the snow past driveways in the mold board, which you'll see right there. The arrow shows what the mold board is. I refer to the mold board a lot, and I don't think people really know what a mold board is. So this is just a picture of one of Sioux Falls's snow gates and motor graders. That's what it looks like when it's carrying the snow across a roadway or a driveway. This is a short video I wanted to show you guys. Basically, this was a 2.5 inch snow that we had last year, and I did the video just in front of the blade to show just kind of what we're collecting and how the snow gates work. Now, you'll see in this video, our operator is trying to stay fairly snug to the existing windrow, and it's about 30 inches tall, the windrow is. When you're snow gating, the further away from the windrow, the existing windrow, the better they work, but it also narrows the road up quite a bit more. And you can narrow a road up easily by 2 foot on a snow event if you're using it completely properly. We do try to keep the roads as wide as possible, but here we go. And you'll see as the gate went down, it collected a fair amount right there. It came pretty close to the mailbox. And you'll see some of these areas, where we have issues too. These snow gates, we're getting over quite a ways. You'll see them kind of move out and back in. But with snow gates and narrowing of the road, you get a lot of mailboxes. People complain about having to clean around their mailboxes more with the snow gates. As the season goes on and you narrow up the road, that becomes a problem. And a lot of people do a good job with their mailboxes because they want to get their mail. But with a plow truck, the mold board is about 4 foot tall, whereas a mold board on a blade is about 21 inches tall. So you're able to get the snow up higher with a truck plow and push back more. You're able to store more on the boulevard. This video, as you can see, we'll cross the road up here. He got in actually very close. He should have actually would have helped to move out more. But yeah, the mailboxes are real close. He's a great operator. He does a good job. I don't think he's taken out too many mailboxes. Here's the road he's crossing. And you'll kind of see some trickle out of the front. Now that's just with a 2.5 inch event. In the snow, you'll see it kind of builds up towards the center line of the road as he goes along. Like I say, if you get away from that existing snow berm, it evacuates better, but it also narrows up the road a lot. So it's kind of, you got to figure out what the best of two evils is. Okay. This is just some of the pros about snow gates. Snow gates work well in conditions less than 5 inches of snow, and early in the season they work really well. First snow event, you don't have any existing snow berm on the edge of the road. The snow evacuates well, and they're perfect in a first snow event. Even if it's a higher event, they work pretty well. Let's see, that's what the first two say. The snow gates definitely help reduce the amount of snow in the end of driveways. You can't keep all the snow out, and you saw in that video, even when we crossed the driveways that were clear, there was still snow that would trickle out. Not a lot in that case. That was only 2.5 inches of snow. It did a pretty good job. And this is where I was talking about the 1 or 2 foot away from the existing windrow. The gates work a little better in that case, but like I say, it does narrow up the roads. With a 21 inch mold board, we can get snow about a windrow about 30 inches tall. Depends on the speed we're going. The other thing with the heel of the existing snow gate, the heel, I actually wanted to take the time to show you some other videos. I don't have those here today, but the heel of the snow gate does prevent some of the snow from evacuating. It's just the design of it, and it's the best gate that we have found and Sioux Falls has found is a Hankey high lift gate. It works really well for us in most conditions. These are some of the cons. The snow gate, the cost of the gate itself is around $8,000. It requires a 6-wheel drive motor grader. That cost, new cost today is about $330,000. Snow gates reduce the speed of plowing by 25 to 35% or 2 to 3 miles an hour. Yep.
Rob, can you quantify that in time? Or maybe you have it up there someplace, but how much time are we talking there?
Actually, I do have it up here, and I think we'll get to that. I do believe I do have a percentage. Actually, I do have in this presentation a summary. Sioux Falls did a study in 2011 on snow gates, and it's really good information, and it fits really close to what we're finding with snow gates as well. But they do talk about time in their study as well. Let's see. The gates, 25 to 35% or 2 to 3 miles an hour. They are hard on equipment. If you saw in that earlier picture, you could see the snow it was carrying. The gate, they're designed really tough, but during wet, heavy snow that we try to move with them, Sioux Falls has more of issues with this, and we haven't had issues with our gates bending so much. Our first gate did, but that was a different brand of gate. It was a cheaper brand. But we do have issues with cylinders and cylinders breaking. We've replaced 3 cylinders so far at $800 a piece. Let's see. Due to the extra weight of the snow gate, the cutting edges wear faster. On that right-hand side of the machine, that weight to that gate is quite heavy. And so when we have the blade in float, which is basically where you just let the mold board float with the road, there's more wear on that right side, and we do change cutting edges out quite often on our blades with gates. And a set right now we're paying about $200 a set, and we might change those 2 to 3 times a day during a plowing event. There is higher operator fatigue, and you'll see I didn't have them on any of these videos, but I do have several videos, GoPro videos of the operator and having to run that and keep his eye down here and watching the driveways and trying not to hit the mailboxes. You saw how close he comes to them, and he's trying not to tick those, but yet still get the snow over as far as he can and evacuate it. On a higher snow, he would have to stay further from the curb. On a 2.5-inch snow, he was able to cheat it a little bit and push it into the windrow a bit. Let's see. Yeah, actually, the snow gates cause more narrowing. We talked about that. Basically, 2 to 3 foot each event. On the higher snow events, you would narrow your road up more. We've had issues like the localized flooding in the spring. These snow gates, because they narrow up the roads, you cover up your storm drains. And we do have issues. We had, and you'll see later in my presentation, when we had the 25 inches of snow in the spring, we had every loader we could get going to clean storm drains in town because the snow was melting so fast, and we had a lot of localized flooding. There were some businesses, South Broadway and about 8th Avenue. There was a business where the water was running right in their floor. It was just coming in their front door. And we could not get to the drains fast enough because the roads were narrow. So we cleaned, I don't know how many drains it was, but it was a lot in a short time. So let's see. Snow gates do not function well in over 5 inches of snow. You'll see that pretty much in every community that has gates and has studied them, talked about them. 5 inches of snow is really the number that you go by. Sometimes depends on if it's wet and heavy snow. If it's fluffy snow, you can get away with a little bit more. It evacuates the board better. But when it's wet, heavy snow, I'd say 4 inches in that case. Citizens' misconceptions. A lot of people think a snow gate is a cure-all. It's going to clean the snow out of the end of your driveway, or you won't get any snow. That's just not the case. Even early in the season, when you have 2 inches of snow and you stay away from the existing windrow, you'll still have a little bit trickle out. And some of the gates, there's a rubber edge on the bottom. It's $400 to replace that rubber edge. And if we were replacing them as often as we should, we'd go through 2 a year on each machine. We try to lump limp them along to save dollars. Snow gates do require 4-man teams to run them, and I'll show you a little diagram I did here next. Let's see. Okay, on the right-hand side, you'll see currently this is a layout of basically what it would look like when we're going down the road clearing with motor graders. The lead motor grader, we run a motor grader in the lead no matter what, because we want to get the most down pressure and scrape the road, get the ice off the road and the hard packed snow. He puts a windrow over, and the next blade with the snow gate here catches it, and he'll try to, where the driveway is, he'll put the gate down and try to travel on past here and carry as much snow as he can. Now, in these wide driveways, by the time you get to the end of a wide driveway, you have so much snow generally, even on a low snow, a 2-inch to 3-inch snow, that usually the operator has to put the gate up because it's billowing around the ends or over the top of the mold board, which defeats the purpose of plowing the road if it's going over the top of the mold board. You know, we want to get the road clean, but we do have issues with that. These snow evacuation areas basically is a boulevard in between the driveways. In certain areas of town where you might have 3 driveways along a block, and they're narrow old driveways, works pretty good. This here, it's not a very good picture I drew, but it's a sander truck. So we generally, in the 4-man teams like this with the snow gate, we follow with a sander truck full of sand, and he generally is only sanding, following and sanding. And then last, we have a wheel loader picking up the windrows at the intersections. Now the snow gate, guy with the snow gate does put his snow gate down at the intersections, and he's able to get a lot of it across on lower snows, so it does actually speed up the loader, the guy in the loader. He might only have to make 1 or 2 passes rather than 3 or 4. It definitely does help, and my operators have talked to me about that, where in situations where we're going along the highway and we have a snow gate just ahead of the loaders, he can actually help speed up the process. So this is showing basically a 3-man team without a snow gate. If we don't have a snow gate, we'd still run the blade in the lead. He scrapes down. Then a plow truck would run along the curb in the parking lane and sand at the same time. You can set your sanders so they spread out to the left if you want. And then still follow with the loader. So in this case, it requires 4 people. In this case, it requires 3.
And just to further emphasize that point on the difference here, Rob, as Rob indicated on the right side, our current snowgate situation, you can envision how that snowgate blade it has to pay close attention to those driveways and the snow evacuation area. And you can see on that video where they're always lifting that up as soon as they get through that driveway, because sometimes that snow evacuation area isn't quite wide enough to completely unload that moldboard. So that's why they do have to get those up as soon as they can, and why we have this additional accumulation in front of mailboxes, which the Streets Division oftentimes hears about. So if you can envision the gained efficiencies on the left version, that truck-mounted plow with the sander, they're not having to pay attention to near the level of detail and logistics as the snowgate operators are, and therefore their speed increases. You're running a 3-man crew rather than a 4-man crew. You have efficiencies gained there as well. I just wanted to make sure that was pointed out too, as far as in relation to the speed to accomplish the citywide cleanup.
Rob,
emphasize that.
Does the following grader have a snow gate as well?
In this case, this is the only one with a snow gate, and that little red line, you can't see it very good there, but that's the only one with a snow gate in this setup. So the lead operator doesn't have a snow gate.
Does not.
No.
And then the second one can't get right up close to the curb.
Early in the season, he tries to.
But once you've got
snow, once we have
like in that video, they weren't right up to the curb because where would the snow go?
And generally with our trucks, we'll push into the windrow and we'll keep trying to stack it up over the top, and that windrow can get up to 5 foot tall pretty easily with a truck plow. The other thing that, like what Heath was talking about, that truck, when you run along the curb, we put what's called a curb rub on our trucks, and it's just a wear pad, and our trucks try to stay up against the curb and push against that so that they try to keep the road as wide as possible.
And because of their taller plows, they're able to discharge that snow out of that plow at a lot higher windrow than what the current snowgate situation allows us to do, which again adds to the gained efficiencies because that truck plow can move at a little bit higher speed, can eject that snow out into the snow evacuation areas throughout the route and keep up against the curb, which eliminates them having to go back and widen roads later, which is another fact of the right side, the current configuration. We're having to go back and widen these roads later on, which is another time-consuming effort on Rob's crews as well.
We did, and that's a good point, Heath. We did spend some time, quite a bit of time last year in between snow events widening roads, especially at schools. We had a lot of issues with areas like that because a lot of people need to park along the school routes. So some additional facts. We've been running a snow gate. The actual first time we used a snow gate was, I believe it was January or so of 15. We got our first motor grader, which Mike purchased. You guys approved it in November of 14, so we had it early 15, I would say. But it's been an ongoing test to see how they work and where they work the best. But and this is what Heath was talking about, and actually that motor graders are able to stack windrows about 30 inches tall versus plow trucks that are able to stack windrows up to 60 inches. Basically, you're able to store more on the boulevard with the truck plow. Let's see. Due to snow gates being used last snow season, the roads were narrowed. That goes back into the storm sewer issue that I mentioned earlier about, when we had that 25 inches of snow, the roads were getting narrowed up so much. We had issues with a lot of the storm drains, so with localized flooding because of that. Current gates are used in the core Watertown. If we decide to continue in using them, they in all the neighborhoods, it would further reduce efficiency with current staff. Let's see. Snow gates are currently used on a 6-wheel drive motors. I mentioned that earlier too. At about $330,000 a piece. A single axle truck is about less than half, $160,000 for a single axle truck with a plow and a sander box. Here's City of Sioux Falls. They implemented a snow gate study in 11. The goal was to test operational time, fuel consumption, equipment maintenance cost, and performance. The summary of the results, 23% increase in time to clear the roadways of snow when using snow gates. 31% increase in fuel consumption when using the gates. It pulls the engines down when you're pulling that extra snow rather than evacuating it out of the board. So you're pulling those engines down. They had repairs and maintenance of about $3,000, and that was on two gates in a 5.5-month period. Annual plowing costs, they determined it increased by 33%, and that includes personnel, rental equipment, contractors, fuel, snow gate replacement, snow gate maintenance, and install and removal of mold boards and gates. These gates can also create issues with mold boards where if you have an older motor grader that doesn't have their units that take the blow out of the mold board if you hit something, but with the additional weight that you're carrying, it can do damage to the mold boards as well. Two inherent issues with snow gates cause narrowing of streets, and the storm drain inlets are covered. So Sioux Falls is finding the same thing we did there too as well. With winding streets back out, the cost averaged $2,200 a block to widen the streets back out. And that was in 2011. Snow gates, they said, are not as effective over 5 inches of snow. Now, I know Sioux Falls has tried to use them in some of the higher snow events. I don't know that their success is great. I can't imagine it's much different than ours, if any. I already told you wet snow doesn't clear the mold board all the time. Yeah, the narrowing of the streets causes some issues with parking and emergency vehicles being able to get through. That sometimes is a problem. Storm drains being buried in snow, and of course snow in front of hydrants and mailboxes is a problem. So, winging through this, this season we're looking at continuing. What you see in red is what we will use snow gates on this season. This is 14th Avenue North. This is Highway 212. On the west side you have 21st Street West, and on the east side here you have 19th Street East. That's the zone that will continue to use the gates in. And if we have over 5 inches of snow, it's the same as last season. We just didn't use the gates unless it was a deal where we could reduce a little bit of the snow. That if a guy in a motor grader had a gate ahead, he would help reduce a little bit for the loader guy behind. But in general, it's just billows over the mold board and you struggle. So, and I guess our goals are establishing more efficiency, saving taxpayers' dollars, practical use of personnel and equipment, creating safe driving conditions on our city roadways, of course, and clearing the city roadway system as fast as possible.
All right.
Any questions?
I'm just going to summarize real quick over what I think I heard. Snow gates are expensive. They're expensive to own. They're expensive to operate. They break down more. They cost us more time and money to use. The reason we would go to that extra expense is because when we use them, they do reduce the size of the windrows created in the driveways.
Right.
Is there any other reason we would want to buy snow gates?
That's the main thing, is to reduce the amount of snow that people are getting from us plowing. And like I say, you can't always use them because if it's going over the top of the mold board or around the
Right.
end of the mold board.
Right, you can only use them in limited situations.
Right.
During the main part of the winter, once the windrows have built up on the sides of the road, they're no longer able to be used. So
Right.
most of the winter, in the case of our last winter, we couldn't use them.
Right.
You can use them in the beginning of the year. Sometimes you can use them in the spring. And if you're lucky, a few times during the winter, if you've had a chance to go and fix the buildup that they created,
Right.
then they can be used. So I'm not hearing a whole lot of really great reasons to do this. I know we purchased the snow gates in 2014 on a trial basis just to see if they were worth it. And it sounds like maybe they're not. It wasn't our intention to just do part of the town with snow gates. We are either going to use snow gates everywhere or we're not going to use snow gates.
Right.
But we didn't want to make that big investment. Each machine costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, or each grader,
Right.
6 wheels. And
Yeah.
I'm not hearing a lot of praise from you, Rob.
I tried to find as many pros as I could, and the best pro really is it does, in the correct situation, it does help homeowners, so they don't have as much to shovel. But it's quite an expense for that.
Right.
And in my opinion, I think that's where it becomes a community decision based on, what is the expectation from the community members in general on the time it takes to clear the entire city? Because if that is a priority, then these snow gates inhibit our ability to perform the clearing the entire city in a more timely manner. If it's that everybody in town starts to have a snow gate used in their neighborhood, it's going to dramatically affect the efficiencies to clear the entire town from start to finish. And I think that's what Rob's information here was trying to share tonight. And to put it in further context, as Rob showed on one of his last slides, him and his crews are completely set up and planning to move forward with using them again this winter. But I can also tell you, tongue in cheek, if you as a council told him tonight, don't worry about it, go without them, run 3-man crews and gain some efficiencies, he's also prepared to do that as well. But that's not necessarily a decision we were looking for tonight, but it is definitely something we wanted to start painting a picture for and helping you guys understand, and we could further assess as we move into the winter.
Councilman Bueller?
Yeah, I just want to point one other thing out too, for maybe our listeners a little bit, that there gets to be a little bit of dissent for the outlying areas, where we have contractors that maybe don't have the 6-wheel equipment to run these things. And so that, I don't know about you folks, but I've had a lot of people complain about, where in the hell's my snow gate? So that's just another problem that crops up.
We need to decide if we're gonna make that investment, because it's a significant investment, and it will slow down the time that we remove the snow. Councilman Wilhelm?
Mayor, if I might, just one other question. Years ago, we used to actually take loaders and clean out the end of driveways.
Some parts of town,
And I don't remember
but not
anymore.
the whole town. I think that's
I don't remember how much we did of that. That was great, by the way.
it was great where we did it, but people were like, what about me? What
Exactly.
about me?
And I know there were issues with sprinklers and mailboxes, curbs, and all those kinds of things. But I mean, is there any possibility that we could do that? We just talked about the stormwater management fee. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, is there a way that?
There definitely is.
I think we gotta cut this back. There's people with other questions.
Okay.
There's a price tag for that, and we can figure that out and let you know how much that would cost.
I think it'd
Councilman
be
Hoyer?
interesting to know.
Yeah.
If there's a possibility that way.
Well, I'll toss in just on that too. I agree with Councilman Bueller on that. I was thinking the same thing when I looked at the diagram of how easy would it be just to follow with a little bobcat if we really wanted to do that. But at the same time, I really don't see the pros on this. And I did notice last winter that there were parts of town that took forever to get plowed. Mm-hmm. Like, you could just feel it. I mean, even our downtown was completely shut down for a good long while. And then even down by 2nd Avenue, we were one of the last spots to get hit. And growing up in the community, I always was proud and would tell people in the South, like when I lived in Kansas City and stuff, like, oh, you guys don't even know how to handle snow. We're pros at it. And then this was the first year I noticed that we were a little pokey to get some roads cleared. So maybe it is a serious discussion that we have to have of, is this really worth spending so much money on for a small convenience?
For a portion of the community.
For a portion of the community, whereas, if you're from the north, you probably know how to just plow or shovel the end of your driveway too. Mm-hmm. But something to consider, because there's a big price tag on that, and it's a lot of wear and tear on the equipment, and these trucks aren't cheap. Right. And then we can essentially cut the cost in half of acquiring new trucks that can plow at a higher level and keep our drains clear.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a big deal when it comes to flooding. So, right. And I'm going to a meeting on Wednesday with somebody who has trouble with their storm sewer draining. They had flooding primarily because their drains were blocked. Mm-hmm. But something to think about.
Councilman Vilhauer?
I know we're running short on time. Rob, you said you're committed to using them for this upcoming season. I'd like to continue this discussion. I'm not sold on them. I never have been. And in our part of town, they aren't available anyway. But I really like to continue the discussion at, maybe the next meeting or next committee meeting, even, because I think we need to take a hard look at whether we continue using these.
Yeah, it definitely will make a difference on how we move forward with purchasing certain types of equipment.
Councilman Roby?
Just for the record, I was not in favor of these prior, and I'm not in favor of them now because of the expense and the lack of efficiency. If last I remember, when we have a snow event, our people travel, is it about 400 miles?
Actually, we have a very accurate mileage on our street center lines. Our engineering staff, Heath's engineering staff, and one of my people helped to find out how many miles of roadways we have. But we have 400, I believe it's 451 lane miles and that equates to 202 centerline miles that we maintain in town.
So that furthers my point. I think these don't justify themselves. I think there's way better use of money.
Can we get this on the agenda for the next committee meeting for further discussion?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that would be fair.
And if I could add one level of detail regarding the equipment, I think it's a great idea to continue the discussion because we have slated in 2020's budget to buy another 6-wheel road grader with a snow gate on it. And obviously, by all means, if we decide to the contrary, we wouldn't want to go down that path come 2020's budget. So I think it'd be timely to have the discussion continued at the next meeting.
Right. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is old business. Is there any old business? Is there any new business? Councilman Vilhauer?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I heard this, it was addressed to me just in passing at noonday. We didn't have a chance to follow up with the conversation. Do we have any issues with blockage on, with the river on the 212 bridge? Because somebody reported this morning that there was blockage with the road, with the new bridge construction. Are you aware of anything, Mayor?
Well, they do have to put dams up to do the work, and they've taken them down, and Heath could probably answer this better. Colin, have you heard what's the very latest? There's still water flowing past, and I'll let Colin answer that.
Weirdly, this has been a question from a few people lately. From an engineering standpoint, I do not think that it's blocking water at all. Yes, they had to build the dam and the weirs, or not the weirs, sorry, but for the piers they put sheet piling in as well. I don't think that did anything for the flow. It still allowed water to flow past it. It's kind of like when you put your finger over a garden hose. The same amount of water is going through there. It just may increase the flow just a little bit. That's the case here. It's not affecting any upstream water or anything. We just have a full watershed right now. And
Did they take down the cofferdams, though? I thought those were removed.
the cofferdams are removed, but this week we are expecting some movement on the sanitary
So
sewer
they'll put
crossing.
them back up for the sewer construction temporarily. So, and there is a backwater effect for a short distance, but I know people have asked if that's why the lake isn't draining. No, that is not why the lake isn't draining. Any other old or new business? We do have a reason to go into executive session tonight in accordance with SDCL 1-25-2 in order to discuss contract and economic development with our attorney. And I don't know, should we postpone it? What are you thinking? We should postpone it? Yeah, I know. We'd have to delay our council meeting start. So we will have executive session, but we're going to have to postpone that until after our very short council meeting. Luckily, the agenda is the smallest I think it's ever been since I've been mayor. So we do need a motion to adjourn. We have a motion by Vilhauer and a second by Lallam. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries.